title might be just a little bit dramatic. Anywho, Dark Souls 3, the Ring City, has come and gone, and I, like a lot of other Souls fans, are probably wondering, what now? I've heard a few different websites and YouTubers use terms like Dark Souls is dead. Well, I don't like that. Dark Souls isn't dead. Dark Souls has concluded. I understand in the modern gaming genre people expect things to just sequelitis until they're shit, but with the Dark Souls franchise ending on a trilogy, hopefully if they don't choose to milk it, I think that's the best course of action. The series isn't dead, the series has concluded. It's finished. It's come to the end and it's time to move on to new, bigger, and better things. Again, I understand that a lot of people don't understand that concept anymore. Well, why can't we get Dark Souls 4, 5, and 6? Because we're not fucking 343 Industries over here at From Software, that's why. Anywho, I have been a big fan of the Souls series for a long time. I started with Demon Souls on the PlayStation 3. Moved on to Dark, Dark 2, Dark 3, and of course I have dabbled a bit in Bloodborne. I just wanted to get them all up in my hands so that I could show people, you know, I've played them, I own them, I know what I'm talking about. By no means am I like, you know, super elite, you know, Souls player, but I've played them all. I'm relatively decent at the games. I know how to throw a fireball. I know how to dodge. But when it comes down to it, I, like a lot of other people, are wondering what is going to happen now in terms of Souls-like gaming and what is From Software going to be doing for the future. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about my history with the franchise. I wanted to discuss some Souls-like games that are pretty fun. And I just wanted to speculate about what could possibly be coming later down the line. So, if you are a Souls fan, you might enjoy this video. Maybe. I don't know. Perhaps. Like I said, I've been playing Dark Souls, or the Souls series, for a long time. I started with Demons on the PS3. Now, if you didn't know, Demons, you know, they had no idea this franchise was going to blow up the way it did. Demons had to have a reprint because they needed to sell more copies of it. I was one of the people that adopted the game early, and I loved it. The combination of the high fantasy, the RPG elements, the challenge, which was never a factor for me. It was never a key reason I came to the series. Sure, the challenge was something there that was to be overcome, but it's not like I played these games because, oh, they're super elite NES hard. I never cared about that. I enjoyed exploration, I enjoyed combat, I enjoyed finding, you know, different little weapons and pieces of armor and rings, and just, I liked the exploration and I liked fighting monsters. That was the big draw to me for the franchise. And Demon Souls, of course, to this day is a PS3 exclusive, just like Bloodborne is a PlayStation 4 exclusive. The Dark franchise, however, was meant to be multi-platform. It was meant to take the series in a new direction, and it was meant to branch out and get a wider audience. And I think they did really well in that. The Dark series for me has been a lovely journey. Yes, it's sometimes frustrating, and at other times very jubilant, but I've always enjoyed playing these games. And while I have my problems with it, I don't like invaders. I think they're assholes, and that comes from playing Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 2 and 3, a lot of steps were taken to make the PvP more fair and more balanced. Dark Souls 1, however, was a fucking meat grinder. If you didn't play offline, you were going to get invaded, and you would most likely be invaded by somebody who had tweaked their character hardcore. I remember getting killed by the same dude 3 times in the Undead, I think the Undead Burg, the first area, because I was just trying to summon somebody to fight the Tauros demon with me, and this guy just kept showing up and pyromancing me, and it was one-hit kill every single time. So, like, I have my own predisposition towards invaders from Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 was full of assholes and a few hackers, and when it came down to it, I've never liked invaders since. But with 2 and 3, I've grown to think the PvP is less of a unfair fucking mess, and it's more fair and challenged and balanced. You know, I have other issues with the franchise, like, for instance, the story. Like, I like story in my games, but Dark Souls has always had shit stories. I love the Souls franchise, I love the gameplay, but the story is ass. And I know people are like, but Brett, you could just read item descriptions. I don't give a fuck about reading the item descriptions. Just give me a story. Give me a beginning cutscene, give me an ending cutscene. I'm good. But the thing with Dark Souls is if you really want to understand the story, story and get into it, you have to read item descriptions, you have to go into the lore, you have to like look for the story. And I never liked that about the franchise. It didn't detract from the gameplay. For instance, I couldn't get into Nioh's story because most of it's in fucking Japanese. But I still loved the gameplay, and the Dark Souls gameplay was perfect. The only other problem that I had with the Souls series, and something that I'm going to go over in just a minute, is how each of these games have always had really shit endings. Let me explain what I mean there. When you're playing a game, you're going and getting incrementally more climactic scenarios, bigger bosses, more insane moments, and you feel like it's building up to something. It's building up to a big finale. And the Souls series has always botched the fuck out of the big finales. The Souls series that has the best ending, the game in the Souls series that has the best ending is probably Dark Souls 1. Because the fight with Gwyn had the right tone. Gwyn wasn't a piece of shit. Like, when I played Demon Souls and got to the end and fought the real final boss, let's be honest, the false King Allant was the real final boss. But then you went that bit further and fought that sludge monster in the old one's core, and that was stupid. You let out on a wet fart. That was not fun. I didn't like it. But in Dark Souls 1, you fought the Lord of Cinder, Gwyn, and it was fun. It was challenging. It was entertaining, and it was also very melancholy because he's this disheveled, he's hollow. He's still strong as fuck, but he's a shell of his former self, and it shows the way that the world deteriorates over time. And I loved that about the game. Dark Souls 2 ended really shit as well. That final encounter was trash. Dark Souls 3, I gotta talk about the DLC and the things I have problems with that. But overall, the issues I had with this franchise didn't detract from the fact that I enjoyed the franchise thoroughly. The Souls series is well worth playing, and if you've never tried it, I think now is the time to get into it before it's possibly gone forever. I recommend just starting with Dark Souls 3. It's the best one. It's got the best gameplay. It's got some of the best PvP, the best co-op. It's got stable servers. Play that one. If you want to, though, you could always play on Dark Souls 1 or 2. Those communities are pretty barren, pretty dead. Even on Scholar the First Sin Edition, Kevin and I played through that, and there was like 3 people that invaded us our entire playthrough, and that was throughout the main game and all 3 DLCs. So, but I really recommend playing these games if you've never played them. And if you enjoy hack and slash, you enjoy challenging combat, you'll love this series. It's fantastic. Like I was saying, something I need to complain about with Dark Souls 3. I love Dark Souls 3. I think it is the best Souls game. If you had to ask what my favorite one is, it's always going to be Demons. Demons is always my favorite. If they remastered Demons on PS4 with like the gameplay mechanics of Dark Souls 3 and you had all that good shit in Demon Souls, but it was prettier graphics and it was, oh god, I'd love it. It'd be great. But my issue with like the story and things like that, Dark Souls 3 is much the same as the rest of the franchise in terms of story and in terms of just basically letting me down. I was super hyped for the announcement of the Ring City and the announcement of something that has been loosely touched on throughout the entire franchise, the Dark Soul, the fucking thing the franchise is named after. And to be perfectly honest, I'll say again, playing these games is great, but if you're in it for the story, you're going to be disappointed. And I was certainly disappointed by the time I got to the end of the Ring City. I don't want to spoil it for any of you out there, but the final boss was cool, but there was no payoff with the story. The entire franchise ends on you, if you remember to go back to her in the first DLC, the entire franchise ends on you talking to a little girl and making another painted world, and I was disappointed in that. Fun to play, don't get me wrong. That DLC was fantastic from a gameplay standpoint, but the story of these series has always sucked. Just terrible fucking story. This is not The Witcher. This is not even Skyrim. You're not going to be here for story. You're going to be here for gameplay, mostly. But I do love this franchise. I find it to be enjoyable. I have played through these both solo and with friends countless times. I can't even begin to name the number of times I've gone through. Dark Souls 1 I played through with several different friends. Dark Souls 2 I played through with those same friends and Kevin. I've played through Dark Souls 3 with Kevin. I played through Dark Souls 3 on Xbox with Taylor and Enoch. Bloodborne I played through with Kevin. I love this franchise and I love the combat. And that's most of the reason why I'm making this video. I understand that my Code Vein video is a little goofy because, oh, Brett, but they're not the actual developers from the Dark Souls series. I'm not a journalist, okay? They put a trailer out there and say, from the makers of Dark Souls, From Software. I'm like, okay. That's what I fucking thought. But the fact of the matter is, Code Vein does kind of resemble the gameplay style. But games like The Surge, games like Lords of the Fallen, these Souls-like games, I think should have a surge, not to be punny, have a surge in popularity and should, branch out and form, new communities. I would like to see more Souls-like gameplay. I'd like to see new games developed, either fantasy or sci-fi or, gothic horror or, anime, techno, Japanese fucking weeaboo trash. I don't know, whatever. But I want to see more Souls-like games with this combat style. The combat style in the Souls series is the reason why it drew me in. The combat is... It's easy for a person who doesn't understand it to get into it. Just spam R1, hold your shield up, whack the monsters. You'll be fine. But it's also so intricately deep. Not nearly as deep as Nioh. I'll stand by that. Nioh kicks the shit out of Dark Souls combat any day. But the combat is deep and it's robust and it's something that you get into a zone when playing these games. If you play these games the way you should play them, engaging enemies one-on-one, trying not to get surrounded, being able to pay attention to your stamina and your health and memorize enemy moves and patterns and things like that, you get into a zone playing these games. You get into this situation where you don't even take damage, you're dodging, you're blocking, you're attacking effectively, and I've always enjoyed that thoroughly about the Souls series. It's something that's really hard for other developers to emulate, and I hope that maybe over time they can adequately emulate the combat in the Souls series so we can get more Souls-like games. I'd like to see more games with these themes, more games with these mechanics. Like, just brainstorming here, we have the high fantasy of the Dark Souls series, we have the gothic eldritch shit with Bloodborne, which I would like to see more of. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we also have the sci-fi shit with The Surge, which I want to play desperately. I can't wait to get a copy of that. The Surge looks awesome. But say, for instance, we had another franchise where maybe not going so full Bloodborne, but maybe you were a monster hunter and you were hunting down werewolves and vampires, and you had old English garb and things like that. Hell, maybe a Bloodborne too. But I want to see more games with these mechanics. I wouldn't mind if it was some super bright, colorful techno, some anime girl with hyper armor on and she's got a big fuck off chainsaw sword and she's fighting against robots and stuff. I wouldn't care if it was even that, so long as the gameplay was on point. That's one thing that I always try to stress to people that get mad about my opinion. Like, Brett, why didn't you like this game? I liked it. Well, the gameplay didn't hit me right. The story didn't hit me right. This didn't hit me right. And the thing with the Souls series, if I can think the Souls series story is shit, it does nothing for me. I play most of my RPGs for story. That's the reason why I like Legend of Dragoon, Vagrant story. That's why I like Xenoblade Chronicles, because the stories are so fucking good. The Souls series story is complete and utter fucking shit. And I know fanboys are going to get mad. It's true. Unless you read lore, you don't fucking get the gist of the story. Well, okay, you can get the gist, but you don't get a satisfying story elements. But if I can say the story is shit, but the gameplay is so worth it, then there's a reason why we should copy this gameplay formula and throw it into other games. I imagine another game that could come out and could have the combat of the Souls series, but it has a different type of style. Instead of having reading item descriptions or lore, you have cutscenes, you have characters, before and after you fight with, say, an arch rival or a nemesis, you have anime style cutscenes or fucking comic book infamous, noir cutscenes or something like that. Just different styles and different genres and different story elements, but all revolving around Souls combat. That's what I'd like to see. For instance, there's a lot of different games out there that I find interesting just because of the way that they emulate the old Resident Evil games. For instance, while this is loosely, because it's also an RPG, Parasite Eve, I think, is probably one of the best ways to emulate Resident Evil, because you have that style, but you have different little elements, different characters, different scenarios. Granted, there is the RPG combat, and Parasite Eve 2 greatly and more adequately emulates Resident Evil, but I didn't like Parasite Eve 2 very much. Anywho, you have that. You've got like Dino Crisis, that emulates it very well. You've got Blue Stinger. You've got a lot of different little old school games that emulated the Resident Evil style, and a lot of different horror games have emulated it, in many years since. For instance, Rule of Rose, that I'll never get to play. But I like the idea of the Souls combat, but with different characters, different stories, different styles, different themes, different, I understand the Souls series is high fantasy, so you're fighting, skeletons and demons and dragons and stuff like that. But like the idea of, and I think this would be cool, the idea of taking the Souls combat and throwing it into a different fantasy setting. For instance, I don't like the way God of War 4 is going. I don't like the way they changed the combat entirely. If God of War 4 played the exact same way God of War 2, God of War 3 did, I'd be up for it. But they changed too much. The idea that God of War went from a Greek mythology setting to a Norse mythology setting, fantastic. But they fucked up the combat. Having Souls-like combat in a Greek setting, fighting Medusas and Hydras and fucking Minotaurs and, well, hell, there's already some of that in the Dark Souls franchise. Fighting, what is that thing called? Chimeras. Those are in the Souls series too. That would be amazing. Going into other mythological settings and fighting things, that would be great. I think that would be really cool with the Souls-like combat. Like, I imagine just some game with Souls-like combat where you're playing as, say, a Greek or an Athenian, and you've got your shield and you've got your sword, or you can play as a Spartan, shield and a spear, whatever, and you're going around, you're roaming, and you're fighting mythological monsters. Maybe you're tasked with helping Hercules and his 12 trials or something like that. I would love to see something like that with the Souls style of combat. That would be fascinating to me. And again, you could also go in the exact opposite direction and have Crazy Anime Girl with the chainsaw sword fighting robots. That would be cool too. I don't care what it is or what it looks like. I just want that same style of combat. You can have different types of music, different themes, different art styles, but as long as that combat is still intact, I want to experience what this world has to offer. Either way, the Souls franchise has maybe come to an end. I can honestly say that I wouldn't be disappointed or angry or outraged or rant if they suddenly announced Dark Souls 4, The Revengeance. But I can say that I would prefer it if they ended it on a sweet but sour note and finished the trilogy off proper. Sure, maybe they'll remaster Dark Souls, throw it into a collection, and release the Dark Souls trilogy for PS4 and Xbox One, and I would buy it again. But I like that the franchise has ended. Now we just need to see if other developers can pick up the mantle and make their own adventures with this style of combat. I think that Souls-like combat should be a genre. We have situations where game developers create genres. For instance, the MOBA. No, I didn't know what a MOBA was 15 years ago, but that's a fucking genre now. That's how that goes. I think back to when Doom first came out, and everything that was first-person shooting after that was called a Doom clone. But eventually it was just referred to as first-person shooter. And for a while, these games are going to be called Souls-like, but eventually we're going to have some sort of a name for this style of combat. Third-person action RPG or whatever, I don't know. We need something, though, that's more defined than that, because third-person action RPG can be a litany of different things. But when it comes down to it, the Souls-like combat needs to be here to stay. I want to see more developers make games with this type of combat in mind, that very methodical, one-on-one, rock, paper, scissors style gameplay. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And I'm wondering what you think as well. Do you think any of my ideas are crazy? Do you think any of my ideas are good? Would you like to play a Greek mythology Souls-like game and fucking fight harpies off with a spear and a shield? Do you think that would be cool? Because I think that would be cool as hell. Hell, they could even throw Kratos in there if it's on the PS4 just to fuck with you. Like, you can't beat Kratos. That would be great. Like, don't even put a trophy in the game. Just have Kratos there and have people go crazy trying to beat him, but you can't beat him. He just has infinite health. That would be amazing to me. But, What do you think of the Souls franchise? Have you ever given it a try? Do you need me to recommend it to you? Again, I recommend if you want to play the Souls games, you start with Dark Souls 3. They're coming out with the Fire Fades edition, which has the DLC included. You can get it and you can play with me on PS4 as soon as I get some more Plus. What do you think of the Souls franchise? What do you think of my video? Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, and take care. I really want some more Souls games. The Surge looks awesome.